Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over the Bitcoin miners. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so before I go over the Bitcoin miners, I just want to show you guys our current position so you guys can see we have like a whole slew of craziness going on here with the options. So we have one put on CLSK, two calls on CLSK, another call on CLSK. Or sorry, no, that's a put. So two puts on CLSK, two calls on CLSK. We have two hut sell calls, one put on two puts on Mara actually, Riot, one sell call, and then CLSK, one sell call, Riot, one sell call, hut 8, another sell call, and some btbt sell calls. So you can see kind of a little bit of chaos going on here. And when we did the dividend portfolio dividend tracker sheet yesterday, that did not include the notional value for all of the Bitcoin miners that we have. I don't know what that exact number is for all the Bitcoin miners, but it's up there. It's like, oh gosh, I don't know the exact number. Maybe like 15,000 or something, 18,000. I'm not sure, but it's a lot. Let's just put it like that. So I'll show you guys the different miners we have here. So 343 shares essentially of hut 8. 700 shares btbt. We already went over why we got rid of half of these. So let's see, Riot 300, CLSK 300, and of course we don't have any Mara right now. The reason why we don't have Mara is because we have puts on Mara, so that would explain why you guys don't see it here. We have to put the shares first in order to actually have the Mara shares. So now let's go over to the charts, and we'll start out with Mara, of course, because Mara is the biggest Bitcoin miner. All right, just got to give it a second, guys. We haven't actually jumped on TradingView this morning. Woke up a little late and kind of got started a little bit later than normal. So let's go ahead and go over the miners now. All right, so Mara, as you guys can see here, we are inside of this ridiculously huge channel here. I mean, this thing really ranges pretty far and wide. So $3 at the bottom to $19.50 at the top, then to $7.30, then to $33, now $15. So something I want to kind of point out here, if we are to continue in this channel, as you guys can see, we keep bouncing off the bottoms and the top here. I want you guys to notice the most current pivot point here, which is down here at the bottom. So if we bounce from the bottom to the top, and I'm just going to draw this out a little bit, so I can give you guys potentially a price estimate where we're going. Again, there's no guarantees it's going to hit this estimate, but this is just to kind of give you guys an idea. So I'm going to go ahead and measure this currently from this bottom here to the most recent swing high. So you're looking at about 195 days. If I measure this one to the swing high, you can see it's a little bit shorter. So it's about 85 days. So pretty much anything from 85 to 195 days. If I were just to go, I mean, even if I would just went half of the previous time to, let's say, around 50 days, I mean, you can see if it hits the top of this channel, the price target would be nearly $50 a share. Would that surprise me? Honestly, not really. With all the big multi-trillion-dollar institutions now buying spot Bitcoin for their ETFs, I would not be surprised to see these Bitcoin miners start moonshotting to higher prices than they've ever been. Again, you guys got to understand something here that's really foundationally important. Okay, this is fundamentals. The first place that these spot ETFs are going to go buy Bitcoin, there's two places. Okay, they can go buy it off the OTC market. That could happen, or they buy it from the centralized exchanges. Okay, but the centralized exchange Bitcoin on hand, so to speak, the on-chain supply, as it were, is going to gradually decrease over time. The more of this they buy, and again, if we go into a bear market, I fully expect that these big institutions are going to have to the investors that they have with the institutions are likely going to want to dump their shares, because again, these are really wealthy people. They're not going to want to see their capital go to zero, so they're going to do what they can to protect their capital. Again, that's market and trading psychology. But over the course of time, I suspect that the overall amount of Bitcoin that's available on the market will go down. The last resort that these ETFs have to go buy Bitcoin from is the Bitcoin miners. Okay. They do not have another choice. Now, if it's based in the US, which all of these ones that we're talking about are based in the US, if the amount of Bitcoin that they're able to produce is cut in half, which it is every halving, and the amount of Bitcoin that they're able to sell is even less because the demand is outweighing the supply. And the spot ETH, BlackRock and Fidelity and those guys, they have no choice but to go to the Bitcoin miners to purchase them, which I don't think the Bitcoin miners are going to do. I think they're going to hold them either way. I suspect the price is probably going to go much higher as a result of the imbalance of both demand and supply. But anyways, if I were to measure this out, let's say 90 days, you'd be looking at $58. And obviously I'd have to redo this. So we can kind of get that 190-day mark, which, 190 days is possible. If we were talking 6 months from now, you're talking pretty much about December. That should ideally be right around the time when Bitcoin is breaking the $74,000 level and going to new all-time highs. And when I say new highs, I'm talking like well into six figures, 120, 150, 180,000. I would not be surprised. So about that 190-day mark, we'd be looking at nearly a $73 Mara. Do I think it's possible? Yes, I do. So you guys can see the all-time high for Mara in the previous bull cycle was actually at $83. So even at that point, we still would not be at all-time highs. And if I were to do a Fibonacci retracement on this thing, and I'm probably only going to do this for Mara because, again, Mara is kind of in a unique situation. It is in kind of this really macro trend line or macro uptrend here. But the Fib levels would be a massive $360 or so. So I don't think 70 some dollars for one share is out of the question at all. So histogram's becoming less bearish. MACD, or not the MACD, the RSI is holding above the bull zone here at 50 very nicely. It's kind of slowly treading that level, which is a little bit concerning, but based on the technicals, I would still say we're pretty bullish because, again, we're kind of just sitting on this support. Got a break of the trend line, bounced off of this lower trend line here on the channel as support, back above the EMAs. Everything looks very bullish as far as I'm concerned. So current support is $18.40 to about $20.20, $28.90 to about $33.50 on the resistance. If I just measure from the current price, which in my opinion now is a good time to get in. Again, that's not financial advice, but based on the technicals, everything looks good. So just to get back up to that swing high is a 75% move. And I say it's a good time to get in because, again, everything's lining up, okay? So we got a break of the trend line. We're above the EMAs, or I should say we got back above the EMAs. Got back above support. We broke out of support. Now we're retesting the support and the EMAs, ideally for a bounce higher. So now if I pop down to the daily time frame, you guys can see that we're still kind of sitting on the EMAs, haven't really broken it yet. The MACD is looking a little bearish. That's not great, but again, I don't think it necessarily means anything. I mean, you guys can see there has been multiple times when we've had these MACD death crosses, and yeah, sure, the price went down, but I mean, it wasn't from here to here, okay? It was like from, I'd say like maybe right around here at this gap to probably around that point. So in terms of structure levels, what we're looking at here, so you can see a high, low, lower high, lower low. That's kind of your bear trend here. So we're now seeing a reverse of this. Okay, so we have a low, a high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. Now the question is, does this become a higher high next? That's kind of what we're looking for. We want to break this structure level right here, get above these highs in order to confirm this as a bull trend to the upside. Okay, so that's that. I also do want to point out that there was a head and shoulders pattern here, which you guys can see it broke out of very clearly. So shoulder, head, shoulder, or I should say inverse head and shoulders pattern. And the target for this would be, if I were to measure this out, again, head and shoulders patterns don't necessarily have to be perfect textbook. It just needs to make sense for it to be a head and shoulder. 27.60 on the share price. So either way, it's still going to be above the current price. Okay, so clean spark, this thing is not really doing much of anything. It's just kind of range bound. So I'm actually going to start on the daily since we're here. You guys can see that we recently did have earnings on clean spark too, and it was a beat across the board, which it's kind of weird that it's just chopping sideways when we had a beat, but is what it is. With crypto, you never know what the reaction from the markets is going to be. So MACD death cross on the daily. Last time we had one of these, price didn't really go anywhere. It kind of just went sideways, as you guys can see. So pretty much expecting the same thing to happen here. Probably going to be a lot of sideways action on CLSK until we get to the apex of this move. So the one thing that does concern me a little bit here on the weekly is the fact that this MACD has gone up for such a long time, and now we're starting to have finally a death cross. That worries me a little bit. But again, if we are going to break down here, we have to get through multiple levels of support. So we're in a channel. We're also in kind of a sideways chop area. As you guys can see here, we're sitting above the EMA still and above support. So there is a lot of bullish support here that we would have to crack through in order to go lower. And even then, we would still have to break this structure level right here. So if we were to turn this from a bull trend into a bear trend, we would need to first get below here at 1280 and then below here at 650, which you guys can see this flipped from resistance into support previously at that level, just like this did here. It was previous resistance at 1250 to 13, now turned into support. So I think likely, in my opinion, this probably goes maybe down to like this wick here at 1350, and then we get a bounce. Again, this is a bull trend. There's multiple levels of support. There is structure here. Everything's very bullish. I don't see I would say the likelihood of a major breakdown is very, very small in this situation. So let's do the channel measures. So from low to high, and again, I'm going to do this for CLSK because we're in a channel. You guys can see it was roughly about 50 days. So 50 days, 293% move from this point to this point, roughly about the same amount of time. So 41 days, 270% move. So we're currently touching the bottom of this channel. Again, as you guys can see right now, we are hitting the apex of the move. So if I were just to measure this up, let's say about another 290%. And again, this would not shock me. It would put CLSK at $61 a share, which is still not even at the all-time high for this particular miner. The all-time high was $152, and the previous all-time high of the previous cycle was 41, which even at 41, this thing would still be way above where it currently is. You'd be looking at roughly about a 2.5x on your money. So as of right now, I'm going to say somewhere between this lower line here and this lower trend line is going to be support. So that's going to be about 1430 to 1550. Resistance 2120, and then the swing high up here at $25, roughly thereabouts. So if I just measure it from the current price to the swing high, 55%. And if I measure it, let's say somewhere around the convergence of the trend line and the bottom of this sideways channel that we're in, you'd be looking at about 71% move. Now, something else I could do is I could go out to the monthly here. You guys can kind of see this potentially could be a also bull flag pattern. Of course, none of these moves are confirmed until we actually get a confirmation of the move. That's one of the most important things I've learned in trading over the years is always wait for the confirmation. So again, it puts us at $61. It's pretty much the same target as measuring the swing low to the swing high within the channel. So it seems likely, I would say that 61 is probably going to be the next major swing high for this thing. Okay, so riot, we have this inverse head and shoulders pattern here. We have not had a breakout yet. As you guys can see, it is still kind of wanting to get held down here. So we did get a break of the trend line, although we are coming to retest it. So we're below the EMAs. That's obviously not good. So I would say pretty much the only support area that we're going to have here is basically the bottom of these candles at $9 all the way to the bottom of the support at $7.71. I don't think that riot goes that low, but we'll just have to wait and see. So daily time frame, it's much more obvious that we have an inverse head and shoulders pattern here. So you have your shoulder, head, shoulder, and then theoretically we have a breakout at some point of this thing. It's just a question of when. So here's the target. Target's going to be about 16.5 bucks, as you guys can see. Still below the EMAs on the daily. That's a little concerning, but again, if the inverse head and shoulders pattern does play out, we're probably likely going to go up to resistance. I don't think 1650 is going to be the stopping point. I think that's just going to be the first target. So resistance will be actually between $18.60 to $21, as you guys can see here. If I just measure it from the current price, let's say all the way up to this previous swing high, it's a 115% move. And let's say it does go to the bottom of support, which again, I think is not likely. It would be about 167% move. So HUD 8, we have this falling broadening channel, which again is a bullish pattern. Usually when these channels go down, it's bullish. It doesn't matter what kind of channel it is. And when the channels go up, it's bearish. So in this case, we're going down. That's a bullish sign. As you guys can see, it's slowly starting to more quickly push into the top of this resistance here. That's a very good sign for HUD 8, in my opinion. We also have a set of higher lows going on here. You can see each candle that closes following the previous one is slightly higher. That's also a good sign. The only thing I would say that's a little bit worrying here is the fact that we're below the EMAs. We want to see the price get above the EMAs and above this upward trend line here. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to the daily. In my opinion, there's not really much to look at on the daily. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing as on the weekly at this point. So I would say somewhere around the bottom of these candles, you'd be looking at maybe like around $6.50 to maybe $7.50 is the absolute bottom in the immediate short term. And then resistance 1770 to about 2260. So if I just measure it from the current price to, let's say, the swing high all the way back here, 156% move. And then let's say it does pull back to 750 or so, which, is possible at this point, 208% move. But keep in mind, the more times that this thing tests a certain level or a certain price trend, the more likely it is to break, okay? The more a level is tested, the more likely it is to break. And we've tested this thing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going on almost 7 times now. If it keeps testing this top trend line, I think there is a much, much higher probability going forward that this thing is going to break to the upside at some point. So cifr, yeah, it looks like we may potentially have a breakdown of the trend line here. This could be a total fake out. Of course, this thing's been kind of chopping sideways. You guys can see why we didn't want to get in. If we were going to get in cipher, we'd want to get in down here at the support, not kind of all the way up here and potentially on a breakdown pattern. In this particular situation, I would say maybe a cash secured put might be an option to get price or to get shares at a lower price and get paid some premium. But again, if this thing is going to break down, it could sell off pretty hard. So it's a risk. Maybe like a 0.15 or a 0.2 delta might be your safest bet, not financial advice. But the current support sits between 215 to 270. You can see the trend line is basically the current price, and 490 to about 580 is what we'd be looking at for targets. So just to show you guys what the maximum downside here is, about 43% move. So you could do cash secured puts on the way down if you really, really want to get into the stock, or you could just DCA all the way down to the bottom of the support zone. Again, how you want to go about that, or if you want to do that, that's up to you. So from the current price of the swing high, you'd be looking at 53%. And let's just say it gets down to somewhere around 250, which is where a lot of price action is. You guys can see that down there. We'd be looking at 135% move on cipher. So btbt, this thing is not really doing much. I would say it actually does look quite bullish, if I'm being honest. So we have a potential golden cross coming up here on the MACD on the weekly. That's a good sign. We had a break of this falling wedge after retesting support. So that's also a good sign. You guys can see that this $2 level held very nicely. So we had this hammer candle here. That's a bullish reversal candle, especially off support. That's usually a very, very bullish sign. And we also are now testing the EMAs. Didn't get quite above it, but we did get a breakout candle here, as you can see. So maybe at some point in the future, if this thing can get above the EMAs, we'll likely head back down or back up to this resistance. So as of right now, probably about the bottom of the trend line. Again, that $2 level is going to be the support. If it does go back down there, and you'd be looking at 520 to roughly about 530 or so as your target. So the risk here is that this thing drops about 19%. The premiums for btbt are not that great. So if I was going to do this, me personally, I would probably just DCA down is what I would do. So from the current price to the swing high, 116% move. And from the support, about that $2 level to the swing high, 157%. So bitf, this thing is starting to look more bullish. I actually like the way this looks. So we're getting a curling up of the EMAs on the MACD. It's turning less bearish. That's good. We have a golden cross on the RSI. That's good. Bounce off of the kind of longer term trend line. As you guys can see here, it bounced almost textbook perfect off this thing. That's also good. So prices above the EMAs. I would say this is probably likely going to turn into a support zone now, even though we did not break out and have a retest. I'll just call it support because there's a lot of support here. You have your trend line, your zone, and your EMAs. So if I were also to, let's say I were also to do like some kind of downtrend line here, you guys can see that we have our breakout candle here, confirmation candle here. That's also very bullish. So as of right now, $2 to $2.35 is going to be your resistance. $3 to about $4 is going to be your, or sorry, support is going to be between 2 to 230, and then your resistance is all the way up here. So current price to the swing high, you guys can see it's actually pretty huge. So 75% move. Basically, you put $1,000 in. If you waited all the way up until that high, you'd make about $750. It's a pretty good trade. If it comes down to the bottom of support all the way to the swing high, you'd be looking at about 96%. So $960 for $1,000 invested. Anyways, this is the Bitcoin Miners. Hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all later. Peace.